Hey everybody, I am with Dave Benac, who is running for Michigan's 6th district. He's looking to unseat Fred Upton in the upcoming general election. You're also in the middle of a four-way primary, which seems very, very
Yes.
interesting.
Yeah.
Dave, he was also a delegate for Bernie Sanders to the platform committee of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC. So that's very interesting. So you got probably a chance to meet with a lot of interesting people when you were doing the platform committee.
Yeah, the platform committee, if I have to say there's one point that really changed the way that I thought about the political system and made me decide that I really had to get into this race and do everything I can to change it, it was the platform committee, because that was a point where I was in a room with a lot of the political party leaders and people who you don't get to meet on a daily basis. And I got to see that so I was there as a Sanders delegate. And our plan was to end fracking, end the
Hmm.
TPP, end the Dakota Access Pipeline, and to get real regulations on banking, like reinstate Glass-Steagall, expand Medicare, expand Social Security. And we weren't able to get any of those things into the platform the way that we wanted.
Right.
And it was because the other side, and I don't think that it's a terrible motivation that caused people to oppose these things, but it's a being held hostage by the donors, and that's what's wrong with the leadership, the national leadership of the party, the national leadership of the political system in general, is that we're just owned by donors and by lobbyists and by big corporations. And I saw that at the platform committee, where people that I think are our national leaders and people we should be looking up to and have our best interests at heart just were doing whatever they're told by their big donors. And that's when I decided that the only way we're going to make anything positive happen is by get some people into the party and change the way that it functions.
So that's your big motivation for running. Like you've got to get that representation back from the giant donors back to the people. So
Yeah, and so I think that's the big motivation, and that's the underlying thing. But when we look at it, so then we start to look at what are the particular issues that are being held up. Why don't we have Medicare for all? We don't have Medicare for all because of all the lobbyists and all the money that's invested. We look at the for-profit prisons, the for-profit schools. All those things are being held up by donors. So we need to look at these individual items, all of which trace back to the problem of money in politics.
so that's a huge thing. So you're probably aware of all the different Supreme Court decisions that have led to this issue of money in politics. It's not just about Citizens United. It's also about
Right.
First Bank versus Bilotti, the money in speech issue, and I forget the one that makes corporations people.
Yeah.
There's First Bank. There's Buckley Vallejo. That's the other big one. So those like decisions, they led to Citizens United. It's sort of the natural, logical progression, and so those are the things that really need to get targeted. And unfortunately, like that's under the purview of the Supreme Court at the moment. But there are other ways that we can go after money in politics and try to get our politicians to not take these giant sums of money from oil lobbyists and bankers and other special interests. So I mean, like money in politics, that's a huge, huge thing for this show. That we talk about that a lot. The money tends to lead to everything, and when you have your politicians that sit there and have to raise millions and millions of dollars from these giant donors, they're not going to represent the people. And so I'm assuming that that's one of the things is that you're not taking any large donations. You're only taking small dollar donations from individual donors. No PACs, no super PACs, and no special interest money. Am I correct?
Correct. And you're right, but I would say the emphasis is not so much on the size of the donation, it's on the source and the transparency of the donation.
Hmm.
Uh, so all of our donations, we're not taking any corporate money. That's a big issue for us. No corporate dollars at all. And we're really careful that everything that we get is a transparent issue. So we're not hiding any money. We're not letting anybody hide their donations to us. If they want to donate to us, they need to own that donation, and they need to let everybody else know that they're supporting what we support. Uh, and yet, so like you're saying, the money in politics thing, that's a root cause.
Hmm.
and it's going to be really, really difficult for us to do something directly about that. But what we can do is start taking bricks out of this wall. And so if we look at Medicare for all, that's a place where we can reduce some of the power that money has if we give Medicare for all to the American people. If we look at how can we reform the educational system so that public education includes a 4-year college degree or apprenticeship programs or vocational training, then again we take away some of the power in the money in politics in terms of all those student loans that are being written by private corporations. If we look at trying to start creating a system of state banks that bring money closer to the people and get the money out of the control of those giant corporations, again, it takes another brick in the wall away. So I think that's the way we're going to get to this, is start to show the donors that we will fight them, and we're going to do it intelligently, and we're going to do it by taking pieces of that wall apart. And when we get enough of those pieces out, then we'll be able to tackle money in politics as an individual, as a whole system.
Right, and I think part of taking on that whole system, of course, is to replace members of Congress who are too influenced by that amount of money, and really getting people in there who represent the will of the constituents. So now, look, we're talking about issues. You're running an issue-based campaign, as I can see. So what are some of the biggest issues? You're running in the 6th district, so and that includes Benton Harbor and Allegan County and Kalamazoo. So have you had a chance to go and talk to some of the people that you want to represent? And if you have, what kind of issues are they bringing up to you? And if you do win, what would you do about those issues?
So I love that you asked that question, because that is the absolute heart of our campaign. As a matter of fact, on Wednesday at 6:30 p.m., we have a town hall at the Portage District Library for anybody who wants to attend. And that's actually the 6th town hall that we've done in about 2 months. For us, it's incredibly important that we're in front of people and have people have a chance to talk with us, ask us questions, and we're making a point of rolling out a new town hall every 2 to 3 weeks. So we have one in Portage. That's the 6th one we've done. And then on the 27th, we'll have one in Sturgis. So we're also making a point of going to places that the Democratic Party has largely ignored. We've been in Otsego, we've been in Benton Harbor, we've been here in Kalamazoo. So we've really, in Three Rivers. So that's important. We've got a couple of Reddit AMAs scheduled. We've done a lot of door knocking in a lot of communities where when we knock on those doors, people tell us they've never had a politician or a candidate ever knock on their door before. And I think that's what we need to be doing a lot more of. We need to get out in front of people and give them a chance to talk with us. And what we find in terms of issues, because we're really asking people what are the issues that they care about, it's not a huge surprise, but it's Medicare. It's health insurance, healthcare. That is the number one thing that we're hearing from everybody. Beyond that, it's a variety of things, a lot of things that have to do with kids, opportunities for kids, safety for kids, better schooling for kids, education system in general, better jobs, better infrastructure. Those are the things that people seem to really care about, and clean water is something that we're putting a lot of emphasis on as well.
So yeah, talking about healthcare. Your prospective opponent, that would be Fred Upton, that you want to unseat, he basically voted for Trump care.
Yes.
So that's and I was reading some of the articles before this interview, and the Democratic Party, the DCCC, thinks that Upton is vulnerable thanks to that vote. So you say you're talking to constituents, and they're saying that Medicare is a big issue. Medicare for all now is popular. Mm-hmm. It's got a 60% approval rating. People want to see that. It even has a high approval rating among Republicans. Upton's been representing the 6th district since 1986. He's essentially a fossil at this point, but he's been there forever. He's got the power of incumbency. Is Medicare? Do you believe that Medicare is one of the sole issues that you can get peel some of that support away from Upton into your campaign so that a Democrat can actually represent the 6th?
Yes. The simple answer is yes, but the bigger answer is healthcare, health insurance in general, is the is from what we've seen is the most significant thing on people's minds today, for the past couple of months. And you're right, Fred is responsible for that bill, the bill that he said he was not going to vote in favor of. He said he'd vote against it. Then he changed his mind. He wrote the amendment that got it out of Congress. And because of that amendment, if that bill had passed, there would have been about 500,000 people in Michigan who would have lost health insurance, and about 40,000 people in this district alone who would have lost their health insurance. And like what we say is, you can't make that vote and keep your job. That's the basics of it, because there's no way that you can justify that. That's just immoral. And then, but that's a big part of it. But the other thing is that Upton will not own his actions. He is completely not transparent. He does not talk to the public. He does not want anybody's opinion. He's not honest with anyone. And I think that that's really where we have the ability to get some of those voters who traditionally would vote for him, particularly Republicans and moderates, because they want whoever they're voting for, they want their representative to really represent them and to give them a chance to talk to the person, to be able to participate in the process. He hasn't had a town hall, a real honest-to-God town hall, in over a decade. So if he's not going to own his actions, people aren't going to vote for him. They want to vote for someone who's going to stand up there and explain, this is the way I feel, this is the way I'm going to vote, and this is why. And then take the questions from the audience and justify it.
Right. And Upton, it's very interesting that he hasn't held a town hall for 10 years. And also very interesting that he presents himself as a moderate when he's actually very much aligned with the Donald Trump agenda, as you pointed out. Voting, like I said, in favor of the AHCA when he said he wasn't going to, buddying up with Trump on other issues, and all that. So now, what do you think of the strategy of trying to tie him to Trump? Do you think that would be good enough, would be effective enough, or do you want to take more of a policy-based approach? Which I think that's where you're going, but I'm just trying to hammer him on the policies instead of trying to be like, oh, he's too friendly with Trump.
Yeah, one of the kind of the ground rules for this campaign, and we're trying really hard to make sure all the volunteers are on board because it's a hard thing to do, is to avoid negativity. One of the things that makes this campaign so powerful is the massive groundswell of support we have from volunteers. We have over 80 volunteers on our list, and I would say we've got about 30 or 40 of those who regularly show up and do events with us. And that's amazing. We're over a year away from the election, and we've got 40 people we can roll out to events with some reliability. So what we're doing is we're talking about issues. We're talking about what are the problems, what are the solutions, and how do these issues impact everyone's life. We're not taking on Fred. We're not running against Fred. We're running for the people. So we're not running against Trump. We're not running against Fred. We're saying, what is it going to take to make this district and the whole country a better place? And that's, I think, a message that the people of Michigan and the people all over the country, I think, are desperate for, because it's been so long where it's just been this awful, combative political system, and people are just fed up with it. It's time that we got back to actually trying to do our job as candidates and politicians and try to use government to do what it's intended to do. It's intended to help people. It's intended to make the country a better place. If we can't do that, then we shouldn't be in this game at all.
Yeah, I think it's going to be far more effective to run an issues-based campaign, which is what you're doing, than to run an anti-Trump campaign, because I believe there was a candidate that tried that, and it wasn't so effective.
Yeah, we saw how that worked.
Yeah.
The new book takes it a little further.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask a little bit about that, your reaction to Hillary Clinton's new book. I know it has nothing to do with the issues, but I am kind of curious of your take on this.
Well, I can only answer from secondhand knowledge. I admit I haven't read it.
Well, it's not out yet, so
I've read quite a bit about it. And if what I have read is accurate, then it's just more of what is wrong. It's more of why we're losing. We need to take responsibility. It's like Fred won't stand up in front of a group of people and say, "This is why I voted for something. If you don't like it, then vote me out." People need to take some personal responsibility for what is happening around them and the kind of campaigns they're running and whether they win or lose. If you can't do that, then then you're a 5-year-old.
I love that. I swear I want to put that on a quote somewhere. Because yeah, that's what we've seen, and so it's good to see that there's another campaign that's not going in that direction. That is talking about the issues. It's talking about a living wage, Medicare for all, clean rivers, clean streams. I was looking through your platform, and I did notice something that caught my eye, which I thought was very interesting. You had a section on food, drugs, and medicine.
Yep.
So on your campaign website, it says, "I will support any legislation that requires impartial scientific studies to determine whether a product is safe before it's sold to the public." So I thought that was very, very interesting. Now, I believe there's a piece of legislation you actually did support your opponent on, and it had to do with this. Am I correct on that?
I think I know where you're going, and that was a misattribution of the quote. If you're talking about that 21st Century Cares Act.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where that attribution came in.
Okay.
But yeah, I've seen that, and the problem with that is that it gives industry too much power in the ability to say what is and isn't safe. And why I say what we need there is we need to have actual, real, impartial scientific evidence as to whether or not something's safe. It's a big problem we have with new drugs coming on the market.
Right.
It's a big problem with some of the food that we're being told is safe because the testing is being done by the industries that are putting it out there. And as long as we're doing that, there's going to be this profit motive to get things onto the market as quickly as possible, and that's going to reduce the safety for the consumers.
Right. It's another issue linked with, like you said, in the big overall arching thing behind this campaign is the power of corporations and the power and influence of money in politics. So,
so just on that, follow that up.
Yeah.
I've been asked a lot of times about GMOs, and honestly, from a personal perspective, I'm not a fan. And I'm not a fan because of the potential for ecological ramifications that we don't know once those things are released into the environment. The reality of the science, we don't know it. It's not conclusive. And if we were to be able to just say the American public deserves to know what's in their food, then let's go ahead and label GMOs. That's all I'm really asking for. If we can label GMOs, then the American public will be able to say, I know what's in my food. It's an issue of transparency. And I think that's a big thing that needs to be a big thing for the American public in every aspect of life. Just simple transparency.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. Though I'm very pro science and pro scientific method. So as far as the issue of GMOs, and I know a lot of my audience will probably disagree, but I generally go with the scientific consensus. For example, climate change. There's no question, right?
Right.
Scientific consensus. So far, as far as I know, there's mostly scientific consensus on that as well, that they're generally safe. Nonetheless, I don't see the harm in labels. Although some people might argue that it's, but it's unnecessarily scares people. I don't know. That sounds more like it would be more of an industry talking point, but there's a lot of misinformation out there about GMOs as well.
And I think that's the tricky part.
Yeah.
We absolutely have to defend science because that's how we get knowledge, and that's a crucial part of society and us being able to know how to interact with the natural world. But I'm not completely sold on the safety of GMOs. I'm not saying that they're not safe. I don't know the science well enough, but there are legitimate scientific questions, and I think that we should be able to make our decisions as consumers until we know exactly how we feel about it.
And as far as Monsanto goes, I have very little trust in giant corporate entities who are able to throw so much money around for lobbying. But as far as the science goes, again, I trust the science. I don't trust giant corporations. So just to
Right,
put
and
that
that's
out to the
if you
audience.
go back to think Rachel Carson in Silent Spring, and everybody in the industry went after her for saying that she was trying to end the use of pesticides
Hmm.
and return the world to the Stone Ages. And even in that case, in reality, she was not saying that we need to end pesticides. She was saying that we needed to end the indiscriminate and overuse of
Hmm.
pesticides. And she was also saying that the corporations that were making those pesticides knew that they were dangerous to human health, and they weren't releasing that information. And she was also saying that the government knew that those pesticides were dangerous to human health and wouldn't put that information out. So that's the approach I'm taking
Hmm.
here. Is I'm not saying that we need to completely get rid of everything that's questionable. What we need is a more rigorous system of independent science that is going to test these things so that we can trust the sources that are telling us that they're safe.
And that makes all the sense in the world. Um, and I thought that was very, very interesting on that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple more things, and I probably should have started with this, but you've done some extensive travel. Right? You went to Missouri, you got your PhD there,
Mm-hmm.
and then, as you said, you lived in New Orleans for a while, and you said, hopefully this isn't another misattribution, but you said the years that I spent in Louisiana offered up experience that I could have found nowhere else on earth. So I do want you to share some of those experiences and how they might have, if at all, shaped your political beliefs.
Yeah, so the years I spent in New Orleans were absolutely critical for me. I got out of graduate school and went there. That was my first job. I spent 10 years teaching in New Orleans. Well, living in New Orleans, I taught at a school about an hour north of the city, which was in a small town in the deep south. And that experience really did open my eyes in a way that I couldn't have gotten anywhere else. New Orleans is a fabulous city with an amazing history, amazing cultural uniqueness, and I think everybody should take some time to live there. It's one of those places that just opens your eyes to a completely different life. Uh, but having lived in the Deep South in New Orleans, I lived there during Katrina, and so I see what's going
Wow.
on right now. I'm watching Irma approach. Very worried for all the people who live in Florida and people who live along the Gulf Coast, because that is going to impact the people in Mississippi. It's going to impact the people in Alabama. It's going to really be a disaster. And I hope that we can prepare for it as a nation and do a better job than what it looks like. But uh, living in New Orleans, I got a chance to experience a really truly multicultural city, and particularly living in New Orleans after Katrina. It was a point in time when the state and the federal government let that city down, really dramatically let the city down. It did
Hmm.
not step in, did not do its job, did not help the people out in a really effective way. And the damage was so bad there because the state and the federal government had failed to do its job in terms of infrastructure. So when that storm came in, it caused the massive devastation that we saw. But after the storm, the people of of New Orleans pulled together in a way that was really fascinating. It was one of the most amazing places and times I've ever experienced, where everybody in that city was working so hard together to try to bring the city back and to try to make it the amazing place that it could be. And it's one of the things that showed me the power of people. It showed me that when people work together, people who come from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, races, different socioeconomic classes, and really have the same goal, we can accomplish really amazing things. And that's what happened there. It was the people of that city that brought it back.
That's a that's an amazing story, and absolutely something that we've seen time and time again. How when people band together in common cause, you can get a lot done, and that's unfortunately something that gets lost in our politics of the day,
Hmm.
especially with the division and stuff.
Right.
Um, And part of that division I do think is part of corporate media, and how they approach different issues from a strictly right or left
Mhm.
perspective. Although I think definitely the media tends to favor more of a right wing perspective, but that's more on a national level, and I've noticed that a lot. And
Well,
that's one
so
of
just to jump in there, I mean,
sure,
what the what the what you're seeing there is the media benefits from controversy
yeah,
because controversy draws eyeballs. Eyeballs create viewership. Viewership is money. It makes more advertising dollars. So the more controversy that you can generate, the
yep,
more you're going to get people to watch your programming. So for national media, the more contentious the political system is, the better it is for more media dollars. And part of the campaign that we're running is that I truly believe in the phrase post-partisan politics. You know, we can't just keep telling everyone who has either a D or an R that if it's different from you, they must be wrong because every Democrat is wrong if you're a Republican and every Republican is wrong if you're a Democrat. And and now if you're a Democrat, it depends if you're a Hillary or a Bernie, the other side is always wrong. And as long as we keep doing that, we're never going to be able to make the world a better place for the people of this country. And that's what we need to focus on is what are the ideas and how can we have real adult responsible conversations that move things forward.
hmm and as I've talked about before, 60% of Americans support Medicare for all. That includes a majority of Republicans. So that's one of the issues that you can really reach out to this quote unquote other side, but really it's just of the American people who know good policy when they see it. And that's just one example of good policy. Like I know a lot of Republicans that are pro-environment. They go out and they hunt and they fish. They love going out on state land and doing that kind of stuff. And so all these anti-environmental policies from Republican politicians, well, and big industry, lobbyists and things like that, hurt those areas. And so that's another thing that you could probably reach out on and say that we can protect the environment and we can also create jobs too. I mean, solar is one of the biggest industries that's growing in America, and it's actually having a lot of opportunity here in Michigan as well, as
Yeah,
well as
and
yeah,
wind is another really great opportunity for Michigan. And one of the issues that we do campaign on a lot, particularly, is water, because
hmm
everybody wants clean water. You want clean water that comes out of your tap. You want clean water in the streams where you fish. You want clean water in the lakes where you swim. You want clean water in the groundwater where your well is situated. You want clean water where your cattle are drinking. It doesn't matter where you live, what your occupation is, what you believe. Everybody wants clean water, and that's a simple environmental protection. So if the goal is clean water, then we just need to have real conversations about how do we get there? How do we make
right.
sure that the water is clean? And you mentioned state land. Michigan is a largely rural state. We have a long history of hunting and fishing, camping and hiking. That's a big part of what it means to be from Michigan, is to spend time outdoors. And there's a lot of conservative people in this state who one of the biggest issues for them is access to public lands. We need to make sure that we're not selling off our public lands to some corporation that's going to destroy them in the process of creating mines.
Exactly. And yeah, like as you said, it's a very big issue for a lot of the conservatives that I talk to as well. The protection of good land to go out and hunt and fish on, and that's why we need that's why we need rules. That's why we need GASP regulations, and that's why we need representation that's not beholden to giant corporate interests that want to eliminate those regulations. And that, of course, brings us to Upton's record of being for those big corporations and not for the people and looking out for their bottom lines and not ours.
That's one of the areas where he always sells himself as a moderate,
Mhm.
and he does a really good job. And I just would that we have to. That's one of the areas where we have to break through. And I said I will not campaign against Upton, but the reality is, when there are cases where there are clear issues that his record is undeniable, we need to bring that into the discussion. And environment is one of those cases. The LA Times in 2011 named him the #1 enemy to the planet. That's the Los Angeles Times. It's not an incredibly left-wing paper, and it's nothing from around here in Michigan. So this is a national issue where he is recognized as being one of the absolute worst people in the entire Congress on the issue of the environment. And we need to take that into account, and we need to recognize why that is. And I won't go into the long story, but if you look at his FEC filings, it's complete. Those are public records. We're not digging up any dirt or spreading rumors. He is taking tremendous amount of money from the energy industry, and you can look and see when he started taking that money from the energy industry, how his voting record on the environment went even more south than what it had been before. And yet there's no way to defend his environmental record. It's an absolute disaster.
Mm-hmm. And as they say, follow the money. Follow the money, Lebowski. You're going to find out exactly who these politicians serve, and it's always big interest and big business.
Right.
All right, and that's ultimately who you're taking on, in the interests of the people.
Correct.
So
yeah, and that's the kind of the refrain is that we can't fix the problems that exist, and the problems that exist are large, they are widespread, and they're really undermining the health, the opportunity, the freedoms of the American people. And the only way we can do anything about that is if we do something serious about reducing the power of corporate money in politics.
All right. So, Dave Benac, running in the 6th District, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It's been excellent talking to you. We hope to talk to you again as well. And I wish you best of luck with your campaign. You can check him out at his at his website, benacforcongress.com. We'll have some links in the description of if you're interested in helping out his campaign, becoming a volunteer, or donating his campaign. We'll have that in the description of this video as well. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Again, we'll see. We'll have you back on. We'll talk about the campaign some more at another time. But thank you, and we'll see you guys later. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYT Nation.